Okay, so imagine this. A single court decision in Virginia could shift the balance of power in Congress. That's the kind of ripple effect we're talking about today.
And it's not just Virginia. This is part of a much bigger story about redistricting battles and political strategy across the country.
Welcome to DeActa Daily Digest. I'm Joseph.
And I'm Juniper. Here are today's top stories.
Let's start with the Virginia Supreme Court ruling that's shaking up the political landscape. The court struck down a Democratic-led referendum to redraw the state's U.S. House map, calling it unconstitutional. This decision could cost Democrats up to 4 seats in Congress.
That's a huge setback, especially with midterms just around the corner. Democrats were banking on this referendum to counteract Republican gains in other states. Now, they're left scrambling.
And the court's reasoning is fascinating. They said the referendum violated Virginia's constitutional requirement for an intervening election between legislative approvals of a constitutional amendment. It's a procedural issue, but the stakes couldn't be higher.
What's really striking is how this decision fits into the broader national fight over redistricting. Republicans have been making gains in states where the Voting Rights Act has been weakened, and this ruling just adds to their momentum.
Exactly. Nationwide, Democrats are already 8 seats behind Republicans in the redistricting battle. This decision widens that gap and puts even more pressure on Democrats to rethink their strategy.
And it sounds like they're doing just that. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, hinted that Democrats might need to abandon their push for nonpartisan maps and adopt more aggressive tactics. That's a big shift from their usual approach.
It really is. For years, Democrats have tried to take the moral high ground on redistricting, emphasizing fairness and transparency. But with Republicans playing hardball, it seems like the gloves are coming off.
And let's not forget the financial stakes here. Democrats poured over $38 million into this referendum campaign. To lose after such a massive investment is a tough pill to swallow.
And yet, they're not giving up. They've already announced plans to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, though their chances there seem slim. Still, it shows how high the stakes are, not just for this election, but for the future of American democracy.
And the messaging around this is so telling. Democrats are framing this as a fight for the will of the voters, while Republicans are celebrating it as a victory for the rule of law. It's such a stark contrast in how each side is spinning the narrative.
Speaking of narratives, let's shift gears to the Middle East, where tensions are escalating in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. and Iran are exchanging fire, and it's putting the entire region and the world on edge.
The Strait of Hormuz is such a critical waterway for global oil shipments. Iran's blockade has already caused fuel prices to spike, and now the fragile ceasefire that's been in place for about a month seems to be unraveling.
And the rhetoric from both sides isn't helping. President Trump downplayed the U.S. strikes as a love tap, but he also warned Iran that harsher consequences could follow if they don't come to the negotiating table. It's a mix of bravado and diplomacy, and it's hard to predict where it will lead.
Meanwhile, the UAE reported intercepting Iranian missile and drone attacks, and the U.S. struck Iranian military sites in response to what they called unprovoked attacks on Navy ships. The situation is incredibly volatile.
And it's not just about military clashes. Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz is having global economic repercussions. Hundreds of ships are stranded, oil prices are rising, and the uncertainty is rattling markets worldwide.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just stay there. It affects everyone, from gas prices at the pump to stock market fluctuations.
And then there's the human cost. Explosions have been reported near Tehran and Bandar Abbas, and civilians are caught in the crossfire. The toll on ordinary people is devastating.
And it's not just Iran. The ripple effects are being felt across the Middle East. In Gaza, for instance, the so-called ceasefire with Israel is anything but peaceful. The death toll keeps rising, and the humanitarian crisis is worsening by the day.
The numbers are staggering. Over 72,000 people killed since the conflict began in 2023, and almost the entire population of Gaza displaced. It's hard to wrap your head around the scale of the devastation.
And yet, there's this glimmer of hope with ongoing peace efforts. Turkey, for example, is trying to mediate between Israel and Hamas. But the road to a lasting peace seems so long and fraught with obstacles.
It's a delicate balancing act. On one hand, there's the need for immediate humanitarian aid, and a halt to the violence. On the other, there are deep-seated political and territorial issues that have festered for decades.
And then there's the international community's role, or lack thereof. The UN, for instance, has struggled to enforce resolutions or broker meaningful agreements. It's a reminder of how limited global institutions can be in resolving conflicts like these.
Meanwhile, the economic repercussions are global. The Middle East's instability is affecting oil markets, stock indices, and even shipping routes. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is.
It really is. And as we've seen with the Virginia redistricting case, even domestic politics are part of this global web. Every decision, every conflict, feels like it's part of a larger narrative about power, control, and the future of democracy.
That's what makes these stories so compelling and so important to follow. They're not just headlines, they're windows into the forces shaping our world.
And they remind us that history is happening right now in real time. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's also incredibly significant.
Well said, and I think that's a good note to end on. These stories may seem overwhelming, but they're also a call to stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely. Until next time, let's keep watching, listening, and learning.